Welcome to Turek Books Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Joshua Turek. We're never going to read all the books we want, but when someone tells us about a book, that's its own valid form of experiencing it. Our guests come in to talk about the books that left lasting marks on them as readers, and that becomes a springboard to who they are, who I am, and maybe who all of us are. So sit back, relax, and enjoy it. And who knows, maybe you'll end up grabbing a book or two. Maybe you've read some of them and it's nice to hear someone else talk about them. We want this to be like a book club, but without the guilt. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Turek Books, coming to you remotely but live at Bad Animal Bookstore in Santa Cruz, California, my favorite bookstore in Santa Cruz. A couple things off the top. One, I'm hosting a poetry workshop on Zoom. If you want to ponder, inspire, write with me, that's November 8th and 9th, 2 days, a few hours each day. Check out my website, joshuaturek.com. Even more exciting, or equally exciting, November 1st, in San Francisco, I will be moderating a Q&A for the new documentary Pistachio Wars with co-director Yasha Levine. And he's actually here with us today, so you're going to get a little warm-up on what that dynamic's like. But I watched this documentary. If you're interested in California, water, capitalism, unchecked greed, all the things that are sort of wrecking our world. This is a really intense series of snapshots that delve deeper into the Central Valley and the Resnick family, that billionaire couple who kind of sprung into the news during the wildfires. They control a lot of our water. And anyway, without further ado, journalist Yasha Levine, how you doing?
Thank you. Very good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Try to just walk them through every detail of your documentaries.
No, it's important. I think good introductions are important. You know, I think it's a lost art. People.
Well, then let me also say, you're also the author of a great Substack. You host a podcast called The Nefarious Russians with your wife, Evgenia, who was on this show. Check out her episode. It's great, especially if you like Philip K. Dick. And one last thing, you wrote the book Surveillance Valley about the history of the internet, which, speaking of everything that's so vital at this moment.
Yeah. I feel that too, you know, because I grew up partially in California like you did. And although, you know, I came to San Francisco when I was already 9. And so for me, you know, a lot of my journalism and kind of just my interests and I guess my the way that my introduction to America and just my American experience, because I was born in the Soviet Union and came here when I was 9. So my American experience is the California experience, and so a lot of what my interests come from California. And so the book Surveillance Valley, and then Pistachio Wars is also about a valley. Surveillance Valley is about Silicon Valley, obviously. Pistachio Wars is also about a valley. It is based on a big long article that I wrote in 2000. God, it was 13, I guess. It sort of was inspired by that, and the original title of that article, I mean, it's hard to call it an article. It's like a little mini book. It was like, I think, ran at 30,000 words or something, It was called Oligarch Valley because sort of as a stand-in for the Central Valley where all the farming happens in California. And, no one really knows much about that place. People, if anyone's been to Californians kind of taking a road trip, usually people go from LA to San Francisco. They either take Highway 1 if you're a tourist and you kind of bypass all the ugliness and kind of the weird. I mean, it's what should be actually very beautiful, but you bypass the sort of the agricultural kind of factory farming that happens out in the Central Valley. But if you do go through the valley, you're on the highway and you're basically going at least 70 miles per hour. Usually people are like gunning it at 90 miles an hour. It's like people just try to get past that place. It's hours and hours and hours of just endless, dry, kind of dusty farmland that's not even evocative of farmland. It's more like evocative of some kind of dystopian. It's like what a farm would look like a dead farm would look like on Mars or something like that. It doesn't look like a place where anything is supposed to live because farmers had transformed that place into essentially like a monocrop, lifeless chunk of land that has taken up all the water that's there naturally. and provides no habitat for any animals that normally live there, for birds that, migratory birds that pass through there, for, all sorts of wildlife that would normally existed there. It just has nothing to eat, has nothing to live in. It's like a denuded landscape. And so, yeah, so my interest in a lot of my work comes from California and the various valleys that constitute California.
Yeah, it's fallow land. You're excited when you see the fast food, a couple In-N-Out burgers, a couple
Yeah.
McDonald's,
It's
and
like a time
a
warp or
Starbucks
something.
drive-through.
You're like driving through like almost like a time warp tunnel or something like that. And there's these, right? You're just tunnel vision and you're not really looking around. And so the film
No,
that
you're
kind of starts
mostly
out like that. Yeah, it's about that place, but but that place is connected to all these other larger forces globally and nationally, internationally, politically, culturally, in all these different ways that people don't really understand. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I watched it this week. I'm really excited for our Q&A. That's at the Roxy Theater. That's in the Mission in San Francisco,
Yeah,
right?
it's a really cool. It's not even that small. It's a good-sized independent film theater. Yeah, it's a kind of an institution, the San Francisco institution. Yeah, it's right in the Mission. A lot of great
Very
bars
cool.
around there. If anyone wants to get a drink afterwards, it's a really good place. Yeah.
Yeah, November 1st. That's this upcoming Saturday. Yeah, no, very excited. I love the Mission. Some of my favorite days in life are just going picnicking in Dolores Park and doing all that whole deal. A lot of great bookstores. Dog-Eared Books, one of my favorites, is in
It's
the
right
Mission.
around the corner from all there. Yeah.
I'm so excited to have you on for so many reasons. Yeah, I could go on and on. We could do this whole conversation about California. And, like your documentary, it had elements of Chinatown. It had elements of Mike Davis. It's just, a fascinating place and kind of the great experiment of capitalism left to its own devices in such a big, fertile, intense land. So, but yeah, I'm curious. About your reading life. Are you getting much reading done these days? I've been seeing you've been posting some things on your Substack about Society of the Spectacle.
Yeah.
I'm not going to force you to keep talking about it, but
No,
it's
I
there
mean, I want to pronounce his name in French correct because it's like it's spelled Guy in English, but I think in French it's like Guy or G Debord. So yeah, I've been reading. I kind of came late to. He's this French sort of Marxist philosopher and political activist, I guess. I don't know. I kind of don't like that term activist because it sort of gives us professionalized. Tag to people. But he's a pretty kind of a big name if you're in academia and people know of his work. But he's not really well known by the general public. But he wrote a book in the late 60s, kind of trying to analyze, or in a structural way, like the emerging kind of entertainment, media, political complex that was kind of really starting to take shape. I mean, this is the 1960s, and so television was coming online, and film and radio and newspapers and things like that. And he looked at like media production and entertainment, our participation in it, as like a very important part of capitalism. And media itself is like the most important commodity that we consume. It's not like separate from other commodities or other things that we buy and use, but it's like a central component to it. And he did this almost like it's kind of esoteric. It's almost religious in a way, you could say. It's these little. It's a very short book. I recommend people read it because it does read like almost like something you'd read out of the Old Testament, like one of the prophets who's really capturing kind of the corruption and the evilness that's taken over society. And it really speaks to I think a lot of people who only now have discovered him are rediscovering him now because of the internet and the way that it's completely sucked everything into itself, and where the actual show and what happens on the screen or what happens in the media is more real than real life to us. It feels more real life outside of the media environment. Almost feels like it's not. There's something incomplete about it. That's why people feel compelled to like take pictures of everything all the time, to post it on Instagram, to tweet, to be on Facebook, to do TikToks. I mean, it's a compulsive thing. I mean, you see it with like people just you go to a show or a concert or museum or to the park, and it's just all that people are doing are just like taking videos of the exact same thing that everyone else is taking a video of. never to look at that
Yes.
video ever again. Yeah.
Someone said we're not living, we're anticipating memories.
Yes, yeah, we're hoarding this stuff. We're hoarding it. We're hoarding reality, and then we want to relive it. So hopefully we can relive it at some point. But just the mediation of everything through the entertainment complex. I mean, he really captured it in this kind of really dark and funny way. But it's and because it's really hard to capture the I don't know, on almost like a spiritual or metaphysical level, the feeling of being in the system, because you kind of catch glimpses of it once in a while, but then you can't always be existing on a meta level all the time, and he captures it really well. It's a great book. I recommend people check it out. It's like it's almost, yeah, you can like dip in at any point almost, because it's not really a narrative book. It's more like, I don't know, like blocks of little paragraphs of little insight and wisdom into our society. But
You need some context for the middle parts of that book, though. I felt like the first part and the last part, like anyone could understand what he's
yeah.
talking about, and it's like pretty fascinating stuff. To me, it was like the division of labor made image
Yes.
and what that all means.
The section on like the beginning of the commodification of time and history, essentially who owns history and who owns, like, yeah, the concept of time, and who produces historical narratives and all these things. It's great, because it is like the central part of it. Does seem like who controls the mythology in our society is ultimately the one who's in control and in power,
Yeah, that's right.
and the mythology of our age is really, who's it controlled by? I mean, I guess it's controlled by, I guess, like the dominant power now that controls it are these, these tech platforms, or these tech companies. I mean, you have like, with, especially now with, it's kind of obvious now, because they're the ones who are organizing society. They're the ones who are putting things into controlling your feeds, controlling your search results, controlling kind of what is, at the topmost level of what you see when you interact with these technologies, and everything is mediated through these technologies now. I mean, you can't even get like a doctor's appointment without being on these things. But now with the AI and with things like ChatGPT, it's also like they control, their models essentially control the answers and the things that you get, and people are treating them as definitive answers. I mean, to the point where they're treating them like a kind of omniscient, at least, entities that are honest. And so, yeah, they control the organization of information, and so they control ultimately like our sense of the future, our sense of ourselves. And so, yeah, it's great stuff. Again, yeah, it's not light reading, but I've been going over it because I've actually, because I'm finishing this documentary that has been in the works for now a decade. I'm now finally putting it to bed. It's going to be released on November 7th, and I kind of been wanting to do something in the visually with my book Surveillance Valley, and in fact, it was going to be a show. It was going to be a show before COVID hit and the project collapsed. It was actually going to be like one of those like fancy shows on HBO or Showtime, like a documentary series, like a limited documentary series. But that collapsed, that whole project, and I've been wanting to resurrect it and do something visual about. To tell the story visually, to tell the history of the internet visually, because especially now in the age of, where the internet is such a visual medium, it just pushes. I mean, we're part of it right now. We're recording this podcast, we have the audio component, we have the video component. This will probably be pushed on someone in some feed, whether Instagram or their podcast app, whatever one that they use. We're bombarded with information, we're bombarded with images, we're bombarded with audio. I would like to really capture that essence, in retelling, like the insanity, the visual and auditory and information insanity of our age. I really, really would like to capture it somehow. And so I've been messing around with different ways of trying to like tell the story. I'm just in the very beginning stages of it because I haven't had much time, but I've been kind of almost like a research and development phase of this documentary. I hope it won't be too experimental, but I mean, but you know what I'm saying. It's like you go online and it's like it is just the most insane combination of things that's thrown at you. It'll be like some ads for the NFL or some ad for some basically like some sex toy or something, and then it'll be like some genocide content from Gaza and babies ripped apart. Then it'll be like a comedy skit from like a comedian that you follow. Then it'll be, another ad. Then it'll be, Elon Musk talking about basically like, I don't know, populating, impregnating, millions of women. I mean, it'll be like just, and then you'll have like AI videos of some little like chicken banana fucking viral trend or something. It's fucking insane. I mean, I don't think people really understand, because we've been like slowly cooked in this environment, where we've been like forced to. It's been normalized for us, But like if someone had teleported people from like even 20 years ago to the internet as it exists now, people might go insane watching this stuff if they were forced to watch it like we are for hours and hours and hours. It's like whatever criticism people had of cable news and of television, like it's just like astronomical, and no one even talks about it anymore. There's like no criticism even of it because we've been so habituated to it. And so I kind of want to bring it into like an artificial or like a created form, the insanity of it, so that people can like actually see what's being done to our minds. Because
Please.
ultimately, I think it is really a nasty technology, and the way that it's been deployed against us, and to what end,
And you've studied it more than most. You've documented it more than most. Yeah, like you said, slowly cooked. It's like we went TV to cable TV to Nickelodeons to TV to whatever, to dial-up internet, slightly faster internet, to now you're carrying the internet in your pocket. You can also gamble on it, so it's a casino. It's also a shopping mall, so you better have some level of impulse control. It's also a pornographic machine, speaking to impulse control.
Yep.
And,
you also have to
you
also have to I don't know, if you have kids, like you're interacting with your, with the school through that phone. You're getting like updates about your kids through that phone. I mean, it's the entire, I mean, the entire insanity of the situation, from porn to like, to children, basically in this little thing. I'm surprised more people aren't like snapping and, basically becoming kind of lone gunmen. It's happening.
I think we're actively in the throes of addiction, and it's like a communal addiction, and we haven't hit rock bottom with it yet. Every time I take mushrooms, which is not frequently, and look at my phone, I can't grasp it, and it becomes very clear to me how the speed, the velocity in which this phone, the graphics and the information move on it, the fact that we've become attuned to it, and it's the first thing we look at in the morning, is it's utterly insane. And anytime you take a break from your phone, the same thing happens. I've also been thinking lately how you look at your dogs still don't have phones, birds still don't have phones, and they're behaving, they're adjusting to our weird behavior from our phones, but they're behaving more or less like the world did without phones. And I've just been really thinking about that lately too, is like not everything has to entertain you. And that goes to the David Foster Wallace of it all. But also I wanted to mention the book The Image, written in 1961 by this guy Borstein. And Guy Debord in Society of the Spectacle actually talks shit about it in that book. It's a great companion to that book, because he talks about what he calls pseudo events. And you're talking about at the concert how everyone has their camera phone up and they're all documenting the same exact thing, or every version of that. And this is 1961 he's talking about. But we're creating events out of things that aren't events. They might be people's political agendas. They might be people's feelings, but they're not actually events. Like a press conference, that's not an event. That's a pseudo event. And also when you go to an NFL game, how you experience it is almost deflating after you've witnessed the pseudo event on a screen, and the glossy direction and the dynamic movement of the cameras and all the rest of it, that we're kind of living it. When I say not everything needs to entertain you, it's like what these things are doing is they're creating a feeling where our physical reality is disappointing because it's not acting to the level of entertainment that we've become accustomed. But it's like we must retain not being entertained by it.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. I mean, I think, and also another great book on the subject is Neil Postman's Entertaining Ourselves to Death.
Oh, I want to read that.
Which is, Yeah. It's exactly what you're talking about, and I mean, he traces the history of it. I mean, he's primarily talking about because well, this was in the '80s, I think, in the late '80s or mid '80s that he wrote the book. You know, it was like a bestseller at the time. You know, he went on a big lecture circuit. Like, there's some great lectures from him on YouTube that I highly recommend people watch. Neil Postman. Yeah, I mean, and he talks about it. You know, and these pseudo events, right? I mean, this is why I think looking at technological aspect of it is important, because these pseudo events couldn't really have happened without some kind of technology underpinning it, right? Creating a pseudo event, right?
The graphic revolution is what he calls it. The graphic
Yeah.
revolution.
But even before that, I think, you know, Postman, I think correctly traces these first sort of pseudo events to the telegraph, because his argument, and I think it's right. I mean, now, because you could say that, you know, the printing press, or, you know, then, you know, there were books and then newspapers. Newspapers became the first really mass media, but still they were very local. So there were newspapers, every little town had a newspaper, you know, had like a local, whatever, the local business, you know, community, let's say in America, every little shitty town had a little newspaper, you know, and it was put out like every week or every few days, and it would have like commercials and advertising, and it would have like community things that were of interest to the community. They were very localized, right? And so, because there was no way to transmit information between these towns, everything was localized, you know. So maybe you'd get like someone who travels somewhere, and they'd like file, you know, a story by the mail, you know, you'd like print it, you know, a month later, or, you know, or months after it already has happened, and it'll be some travelogue or some kind of reporting from somewhere, or some kind of story. But it was, as far as like news, you know, like the way that we can think about news, things reported, they were all very local, and they couldn't not be local because there was no way to transmit them. And so the telegraph, when it was invented, basically allowed newspapers to suddenly, you know, beam into people's minds, you know, through the printed page, like events that like happened, I don't know, hundreds of miles away that same day or the day before, you know. So you could transmit suddenly what happened, you know, in Paris to people who lived in New York, you know. And again, and you transmit to them an event that it's not it's a pseudo event because it, you know, they're representing it on the page, but it's also like, why does someone, you know, care about some scandal in Paris, you know, if you live in New York City? It doesn't really matter. So it was the beginning of kind of like the gossipization of news, and also the removing of news from the local community context, meaning that it was just, whereas if news was local, I mean, you could have some power over it, you could do something with it, you know, there was some kind of natural feedback loop, you know. It was more of like a community board or something like that, where people talk to each other, an extension of that much. But when you remove news and, you know, move them to hundreds of miles or thousands of miles, then it's like, okay, then it's just trivia, then it just becomes purely entertainment in the guise of news, right? And so, and it was the beginning of that. And of course, you know, when you have like film, and then, you know, TV, and you could transmit this, you know, television signals electronically, you know, through satellites and all this stuff, like it became instantaneous visual, you know, communication. And so, but he traces it to the beginning, to the telegraph, you know, and he says that, like, within, you know, with the demonstration of the telegraph, within, like, I don't know, a matter of weeks, newspapers, you know, who were themselves, you know, basically capitalist enterprises who wanted to increase their circulation, wanted to make money by selling newspapers. Immediately, they were, you know, in New York especially, like that was the beginning of the revolution, and they saw the business opportunity and the entertainment and opportunity that the telegraph provided. And so, like, we're kind of on the tail end of that now with the internet, where, you know, it's sort of like that to some kind of, I don't know, billionth degree, where we aren't even, because we've been so normalized that we don't even consider that this is not. The fact that you're watching something on the screen happening thousands of miles from you, you're totally powerless to do anything about it.
Powerless.
What's the point of knowing this? What is the point of watching this? Like, why are we doing it, you know?
We've been rendered passive participants and left to helplessly digest the world. I haven't thought of it as simply as that, but that you're right. I mean, and that's what you've gleaned from that book.
Yeah. And you know, and like, I don't know, even my wife Evgenia, you know, she was made it like a documentary, a short film satirizing the documentary world. You know, I'm making a documentary, you know, but I understand what documentaries do this too. They kind of like I don't know, like political documentaries, let's say, they kind of make you think that you're engaged politically in something by being a totally passive consumer of information. And it might be for a good cause. It might be because you really do care about some issue and you do want to do something. But ultimately, it always stops at just the watching, right? At the passive consuming of some kind of political content. It never actually leads to any kind of political organizing, or because that's hard, that's difficult, that means you have to, no one's curating that for you. That doesn't come pre-digested for you. In fact, political organizing is probably the hardest thing for us to do now, because things are structurally against it, and so you really have to spend your time. It's not fun. You have to deal with people. People are difficult. Especially people who are not used to working with each other we're difficult. It's easy to people can barely talk to each other, without freaking out. And so like, yeah, the politics as entertainment, is something that's also or like entertainment masquerading as political involvement or political action or something like that is one of the more insidious, I think, kind of versions of entertainment, because it's really is it's like preys on people's desire for something good, to do something, and all it does is sort of I don't know, it almost saps you of your time and life and energy,
Yeah, you're patting yourself on the back for curating your own awareness of the world, but you're still remaining largely
Yep.
passive. But those things do spark people.
They
Those
do.
things do generate action. Largely, no, but we're not in the largely game. We're in the every little inch, every little bite counts. Every little bit of information and truth that filters through counts, especially in speaking to what you're talking about, in a world where the truth is so, discolored. It's obfuscated. Any little bit that gets across to help us retain our own mythology is helpful, but it's slow
Yeah.
drip. It's probably
Yeah.
just better to go out and tear something down, or to go out and grow something, or to
Probably,
go
yeah. I
out
mean, it's
and
tricky, but then it also, I think, yeah, ultimately, also, if you're just growing something, then it's just you're on your own in the world. You can't. Yeah, it's it's a tricky thing. I think, a friend of mine, was always saying that, you just need to talk to people and basically work with other people, figure, get to know people, figure out what people's problems are, and and start on a very local level and do things. But yeah, it's hard, because really the system that we're in now wants to distract us completely. It wants us to be disengaged from the political process. It wants us to care, for that moment where we're watching something, and then to focus, to change our attention and focus on something else, and care and care and care, and then laugh, 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 care, but never to move away from the curated sensorium, that we are all inhabiting. And so
Yeah,
it's
and for
there's,
care to
yeah,
become a verb, you need care to become a verb, not just an
yes,
idea. But also,
exactly.
I
Yeah,
just
it's a good
speaking
point.
to that, I will say we do need to agree upon reality to do anything with it. Like you said, if I go grow something by myself, speaking to your documentary, someone will suck the water out from under the underground, and I won't be able to grow it. We need
Yeah.
to have an agreed upon reality, or at least some version of one, to mediate how we all collectively behave. And so anyway, I'm just saying it's not perfect. We should remain cynical about what we consume with books and media, but also some good things slip through the cracks that we need to build a basis for how we want the world to be together.
Yeah, there's no need to be, totally cynical about it, because if it's totally cynical, then I don't know, then what's the point of it living? I think every age has had its problems, and being just in a, being a living in the world, and kind of is is a struggle. There's a lot of beauty to it, but there's a lot of struggle. I mean, just look at, I don't know, we're no different than all the other creatures that live on this earth. So for now with us. And their life is a struggle too. It's different. It's more primal. We've created these crazy systems that are destroying us, but that's ultimately part of the same process, right? I mean, we're not separate from those things, and so it's like a struggle is part of existence. To think that you could just sort of I don't know, have your automated kind of everything is perfect world. It's just it cannot happen, you know, and in a way that's sort of what we've been lulled into thinking should exist, that we just should just not pay attention and just enjoy ourselves, and you know, while we also, you know, have to work and work and work, and all these things. And so yeah, struggle is natural, and I think what you were saying, it's like to just live and to not, you know, want to always be entertained, or to not like demand to be entertained, is part of it. You know, it's life is supposed to be boring and kind of annoying and difficult and anxiety inducing, but also beautiful and rewarding and all these things. So yeah, it's good to be a little cynical, but not too cynical, I think, because ultimately then, I don't know, what's the point of it?
Yeah, I'm with you. Every era has its challenges, and they all feel as urgent to their era as ours do to our own. Ours seems it seems like, okay, but there are buttons that can be pushed that could obliterate us, kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Never more so than any other time, but you know what? It's all relative. And yeah, we are swimming through the information, a sea of endless information.
I know.
And even this conversation to me feels like we haven't even gone deep into books, because we're both scrambling to establish reality.
Well,
We're catching up to reality against the distorted mythology.
We're talking about books, though, you know.
We are.
Speaking of, you know, pushing a button, and you know, people like, you know, with a book podcast. So I'm actually because I've been doing some research for, you know, for this documentary about the internet, and there's this great book called Raven Rock, or the Raven Rock, I think. It's about, like, it's totally insane. I don't know, maybe you've heard of it. It was a bestseller some years ago. It's like, basically, it's about all the crazy doomsday bunkers that the government built for itself, to like, so that everyone in the government could survive and we all die while we die in a nuclear war, you know, if it ever happens. So all the facilities that they have, all the crazy, you know, like they call the continuity of government, like chain of command that happens when, let's say, if the president is killed or disappears, you know, like all that stuff. And it's interesting because ultimately, you know, and then maybe we can, I don't know, I'll talk about this because I've been thinking a lot about this, and then maybe we can move on to some, like, you know, lighter fare, somewhat.
No,
is that, like, actually, you know, one of the issues, like, where all this information comes, where all this technology comes from that we use now, the internet, is like the nuclear age, specifically the nuclear bomb, because when the nuclear bomb was, like, you know, created and then you know, dropped on Japan, you know, obliterating 2 cities by America. Like, that launched, like, the nuclear arms race, obviously, with the Soviet Union testing a nuclear bomb a few, like 5 years later, and then, you know, and then that launching basically a nuclear arms race with America. And a lot of the technology that we use now, like the internet specifically, and like this sort of always online communication that we all have now, that was first developed to protect America from a nuclear attack by the Soviet Union. Like, I was reading some funny thing, like right before World War II, FDR, you know, like the president was like the presidency itself was just like a very genteel or more genteel kind of role. You know, like the FDR, I think, got like lost. He was visiting Hoover Dam, and his like motorcade got lost for like half a day somewhere in the desert, and like no one even knew where they were, and it was not a big deal. Like, no one cared, you know, because, like, well, they'll show up eventually. Like, and there's just no way to communicate. You know, there are no phones. There's nothing like that, right? No, they didn't have a radio with them, and because it wasn't considered to be that important. You know, like, you could just go and be incommunicado for a while, and then, like, just a few years later, you know, after World War II, the president, you know, because of the nuclear threat, because the president, first of all, always had to have, like, his finger on the button, you know, on the nuclear button. Like, because that came from, you know, that decision had to be made by him. And so he had to always have this, like, you know, radio connected suitcase, right, with him at all times. People needed to know where he was at all times, because he had to be, you know, contacted. And then all of the, you know, people under him who were, like, in the line of succession to the throne, essentially, also had to be, you know, their whereabouts always had to be known, and they always had to be in touch. And so the government essentially developed communication technologies to make that happen, to allow that to happen, because they didn't exist before, you know? This, like, instantaneous communication is always online. You know, the president was the first always online person, you know, in the 1950s. And then that world of, like, the paranoid always online, like, where's, you know, basically where is he on the map at any given time, that we live in that now, right? Like we can see our locations, Google sees our locations, Apple sees our locations. We all kind of see ourselves on this almost like kind of radar map or something. That was the president, and that was also developed for, tracking missiles and, hostile aircraft and things like that, like a early warning radar system. So both of those things, like instantaneous communication and sort of always an online presence, and like tracking enemy radars, enemy aircraft in space, that was developed because of the nuclear bomb. And then like that moved from the president, and the military to us, it's just some decades later. And so it's interesting to think about, because the world that created this technology is an extremely paranoid, an extremely violent, an extremely distrustful mentality, basically Cold War paranoia, a mutually assured destruction kind of world, where if they shoot us, we shoot them, and everyone dies on Earth. I mean, that's the world that, like the Doctor Strangelove world, right? That's the world that created the internet. And so the fact that the internet has turned into this like place of paranoia, of anger, of hatred, and like, is not surprising, because there's like a direct line between the world that created the nuclear bomb and deployed the nuclear bomb, and was ready to deploy the nuclear bomb to erase like all human life on the planet, and all life on the planet potentially, is the world that created the internet, and I mean, specifically, not like even like spiritually or something. I mean, like the government agencies and who funded that technology were the ones who created this one. And they all continue to be actively involved in this knowledge. So it's not like, it's not surprising, I guess, yeah.
And that also imbued the president with more power, because now the president truly does have the power to obliterate the world. And is that also kind of what's led to this? That's just kind of this insidious under the radar thing that led to this slip in checks and balances, where it's like, okay, well, but at the end of the day, we've now given this one person the power to end the world.
Yeah,
Is that kind of touched on? That's kind of what you're saying as well.
I mean, yeah, that's
one,
sort of
one more
the
component
unstated
to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the unstated thing. I think there's plenty of like, I think historians of American history, or the sort of the evolution of the executive like position, of the executive power invested in the president, will agree with you. I think after World War II, the president began to have more and more and more power, and the Congress essentially stopped, kind of exercising its constitutional authority and role to basically, to put a check to do things like, because war can't even be like initiated without an act of Congress, and now you can just like press a button and like kill some fishermen out in like the Caribbean or whatever, and be like, mission accomplished. It's like, so yeah, I totally agree, to the point where I think a lot of people who will be like, well, Trump is dictator. It's like, well, actually, Trump is just like, he's just sort of unapologetic about it. He does it with gusto and bravado, and like and sort of laughs in your face. But what he's doing, is sort of many of the presidents before him had done. Maybe they were just a little bit more, kind of wily about it and apologetic. I mean, like Obama would launch drone strikes, in the same way. It wasn't against, whatever supposed drug cartels in Latin America, but against terrorists, in the Middle East. And so yeah, it's like, yeah, I totally agree. And the technology is a part of it, because before you couldn't even do that, You couldn't do that. You couldn't like view someone from space and then press a button and obliterate them,
And seen under that light, it's like, okay, we're doing these no kings protests, but like we've given these people the power to blow up the world. They're more powerful than kings.
Yep.
If it's a different guy every 4 years, it doesn't matter. We've created gods. These aren't even kings, they're gods. We need to be having no gods protest.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. They're like Zeus. I mean, right? Or like worse even, because like at least Zeus just would do, bolts of lightning or whatever. That seems pretty that's like an AK-47 or something. It's not even.
He's inherent with that power. He's used to wielding it, whereas these are men who have been given the power of gods, and that's a bad combination. as we've seen.
Yeah, no. If you ever like watch, the president walking anywhere or like getting on the helicopter, I mean, there's like a guy in a a military uniform with like a big two. I think there are now two of them, but it's like these two kind of almost like leather briefcases, like they look like they're like stuffed for a weekend trip, but they are like these little big laptops that have the security codes to launch nuclear war. So
They're still doing it that physically close to him. Wow.
they have to be. They're like I think they're like always in the other room. Like, isn't that insane? So there's a guy. So
Insane.
you're like having dinner, and there's a guy in the other room with the fucking button, and you have to have. It's pretty like you go on vacation. You're having I don't know if he has sex with his wife, but but if you're doing anything, it's like there's the guy in the other room. So it's pretty wild stuff. It's comic, because it's the absurdity of it is it's so overdone almost. You wouldn't like make it up. I think if someone had to like make that stuff up, it'd be too much. I think
Truly.
as a comedic device. Yeah.
What a curse. You're brushing your teeth and you have but you could also end the world in the other room. And it's like,
Yeah.
now that makes more sense why Obama just makes Netflix documentaries now. He's tired.
He was just it's funny, man. I mean, he's
The
just went in and
community
out,
organizer.
He's exactly. He was an activist, He definitely organized the community organized him, I think,
Which community? Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Somewhere, yeah. It's a funny thing, yeah, community organizer. Yeah.
Well, that book sounds great. That was called Raven Rock.
Raven Rock. It's a cool book. Yeah. It goes through all the insane. It's like this strange Dr. Strangelove, but like the a documentary version of that.
There's a Mike Davis book called Dead Cities, and there's a couple of really great chapters where he talks about nuclear testing in the Western United States, and the severe environmental degradation, human health fallout, and just like if you were to hold it up to the Chernobyl meltdown, it's far more disastrous than that. But once again, under the media myths that have been made, it's we blew some things up in the desert, there's nothing out there, and similar to your documentary, like these places, the geographical remoteness, what the ills that people perpetrate in geographically remote areas, there's such a great physical metaphor for the unseen pain of capitalism and the fruits that we enjoy from other people's suffering.
Yeah.
The
nuclear stuff is particularly nasty. Yeah, because it's
Well, you said you had some lighthearted books. Is that
well,
right?
actually, it's funny because we were talking about
everything becomes lighthearted after nuclear war.
Well, it's funny because I can start with I have 3 books that I was thinking about. I was. They're not lighthearted. I'm just looking at the title, and like I won't even read the entire titles. I'll just read the second words of the titles. Okay, one is desert. The other is the other second word of the second book is genocide, and then the third one is called Moderan. It's like a collection of short stories. It's sort of like it's a novel essentially. That's also set in a post-nuclear. World, which is it's actually a very funny book. I can start with that one. Okay, it's called Moderan, like modern. It's a play on the word modern, but it's Moderan, and it's by this very not very well known sci-fi writer who I think worked mostly in like the short story format. This guy named David Bunch. He died, I think, in like 2000, and he's from the Midwest. He was just a guy that I don't know, liked to write. He was, I think, a poet, and he published a lot. And because back in the day, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, like sci-fi was not mainstream. It was not considered. It's not considered like something that real writers or real novelists, a genre that they work on is considered trashy, right? And so, but there were a lot of magazines that would publish short stories and things like that. So he would publish in them. And this one is, I think it's it's a really funny, dark book. It's set in a world, it's a post-apocalyptic world where there was, I guess, nuclear war happened of some kind, or like the kind of what we're talking about. Everything was wiped out. And some human beings, everything was poisoned, very little life left on Earth. but humans, the wily creatures that we are, survived. And then what they did is they like basically like refashioned select human beings into these like, I guess, like these cyborg kind of like fortresses that would just like war with each other. And like the funny kind of through bit about it is that they like, because the earth was so kind of fucked up and destroyed, they just decided to cover it with plastic. And so the entire earth, like the earth ball, as they would call it in the novel, is like clean and even and like pleasant, and it's just like it's like shrink wrap basically, with white plastic. And so if you can imagine the earth, from space, just like plastic ball essentially. And they're like, and so they're these cyborgs kind of fighting with each other. And so it's told from the point of view of like one of these like they're like kind of human because they have, I guess, this partially like human brain or something in there, but they're fully like robotic, kind of like creatures that are like basically stuck in a fortress that all they can really do is like a war with other fortresses that are kind of far away. And it's a really funny book, yeah. And it gets at like the heart of, I don't know, what the world that we live in, because we are, I don't know, all we do is fight wars and cover the world with plastic. I mean, and it's and he wrote, and it's a series of short stories that he wrote. I think it was in the 60s, and they were like collected pretty recently in like in a book and published by the New York Review of Books. And and I think one of the reasons it even came out, because he's kind of a fringe guy, and I don't like, was Jeff Vandermeer. He's a sci-fi author who he's pretty famous because he's got this like series, The Reach, I think it's called, and it was made into a movie that was pretty big. Annihilation. Do you remember that film? It was like that weird zone. So he's a fan of this guy's work, David Bunch, and so I think he helped get him republished, and like so people know who he is. And so I highly recommend people check it out, because it has like kind of Philip K. Dick qualities to it, except it's more absurd and more satiric, I think, but it brings together a style that I like, kind of the high and the low, the depressing and kind of horrific, and the funny, because like ultimately they're very close to each other, So
Yeah, is that what draws you? I mean, because you're someone who's more actively involved in writing, and you're making documentaries, and you're reading for your writing and your journalism. For you to pick a book, there's got to be extra layers of discretion going on. So are you looking for a departure, or you're looking for something that could kind of do both,
It's a good question. I usually like to read novels that have some, or the stuff that I read, if it's nonfiction, can call it. I mean, if it's fiction, I'd like to read things, that have some kind of connection to my world, and that have some kind of insight. It doesn't have to be direct, it doesn't have to be like blunt, but something that, I don't know, like, that I'd like to be able to connect to the world, at least. It doesn't have to be in like, I don't have to like the world that they create, but it has to like resonate somehow with me. Yeah, like even some of the more like escapist stuff, like I'm just thinking like sometimes when I can't sleep, I'll put an audiobook on, and it's like usually like a very particular audiobook. It's or a series of audiobooks, because there's like a series of novels. It's by this guy named, his name is Gene Wolfe. He's this sort of sci-fi, like fantasy sci-fi author who is most famous for this series called, so the first book in that series is called Shadow of the Torture. And it's sort of this really gothic, kind of like neo-Catholic or something, about like a very, very, very far future. Like, I don't know, like 100,000 years in the future, or like, I don't know, a million few years in the future. It's not even clear. I mean, it actually is clear, because it's so far into the future that the sun is starting to go dark a little bit, or it's like losing its power, And so the whole earth is dying, essentially, because it's colder. It's like, and the earth is really old, and it's gone through all these different ages, and it's like, and it's so advanced that like, it's sort of like magical, and yet it's technological. And so but that's still kind of, so, and there are all these kind of weird, creatures that have been brought to earth from the stars, because people have, killed everything that's alive, at some point on earth. And so like people have repopulated with like alien species that are interesting and like, but like, fantastical, and like will like devour you and like, but will then like retain your consciousness and like can speak as you and things like that. Like these like bears or something that it will eat you, but actually will eat your like essence too, and will be able to, you like live inside them, as like some kind of like uploaded, like things like that. So, but it still has this, because it's about a dying world and like the mixture of like extreme poverty and deprivation and like high technologies. It still speaks to like our world, like, and it still speaks to the world that we live in. And so I think that even like the kind of the escapist stuff that I sometimes read or listen to. In this case, I listen to it on audio tape when I'm falling asleep sometimes. Like we'll have like I know. It's like it's interesting because it's poetic and dark and like has like an it's an interesting. It's a bit like immature too. It's as a lot of sci-fi is. Because it's written by like kind of old kind of nerds, but for other nerds,
Yeah, my friend Cam George, who's been on the show a couple times, he's recommended me Gene Wolfe. So, but it's also like what a reflection of our world that's your go to bed bedtime story.
Yeah, but it's funny because I do like the dark side of life. Like I never. I mean, I guess that's why I was drawn to, because it's in the parts that no one wants to look at is where the reality is. It's like
Yes.
my kind of, I guess, a great example of that is to like, if you want to understand society, you got to look at its trash and its sewers. For real, because, and it's the thing that nobody wants to look at. Like people just want to take a shit, flush it, and not think about it. But then like what happens to that shit, because if you think about a city, let's say, or a civilization, with how many people live in America? Over 300 million, I think, right at this point. Like 300 million people flushing their toilets every day. Like where does it go? What happens to it? And if you actually trace that line, that is the best way to understand the society, or one of the ways to approach something fundamental, because it's sort of, first of all, it's a very basic need that has to be met. We have to go to the bathroom, we have to eat, and we have to go to the bathroom, and these are the two things that people don't really know where food comes from, and people don't know where the shit goes, and so people kind of know what happens in between, and so for me, like the dark side of it, the kind of the ugly side of things has always been interesting to me, because I don't know, just the way it's not a turnoff. It's like intellectually, it's more like why wouldn't you like look at the taboo side of society? The taboos are where the interesting things happen,
Confronting your reality.
Yeah, and that's always comforting to me somehow. I don't know why, I don't know, maybe that people find that strange, but
I heard a great line. It was like the freedom from denial. And I just like that totally resonates with me. It's like denial is a big burden, and it makes the world really confusing if you're willing to be deluded by it.
And and denial also makes you angry, I think, and makes you frustrated. It makes you, because it's almost like keeping something in, and having to always justify things, or to explain things in through other means, or to find excuses and all these other things. And it's frustrating. It's exhausting. Denial is exhausting, because it has to be actively kept up. Yeah,
actively kept up. It's an emotional asymmetry. And what a disorienting way to live your life, but which a lot of people opt for, or have passively accepted. So no, I'm with you. It's just funny. It's just funny that like those are the levels. And also you're talking about an Earth as the sun is dying. I was having a conversation with someone the other night, and he said when the macro is bothering him, he goes even more macro. And there is a comfort to sort of taking things to that universal depth, or that universal scale, rather. Sorry, they're delivering wine here in the back room at Bad Animal Bookstore and Restaurant. My favorite bookstore in Santa Cruz, California, where I am hosting the show.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, it's good. Well, I'm hoping. Too bad you can't drink it. I guess it's probably not for you.
Yeah, I'll give you this. They just delivered a nice. Yeah, no, but I can come dine here. It's a Thai restaurant. They have a Thai restaurant at night and a used bookstore during the day. It's pretty.
That's
rad.
Amazing. Yeah, it's a great combination. Actually, it's funny because Gene Wolfe is this very dark, because I think he converted to Catholicism, and so he at some point, and he was like a technical writer or like a science writer, so he either edited or, like some kind of scientific journal or something. So he's very, very technical and kind of like methodical and clearly religious, because the story is also about like a Christ-like figure that's going to bring a new earth, a new earth, and like reboot the cycle, But it's funny because his book is actually inspired by another series of books written by another guy. His name is Jack Vance, who's also another sci-fi author. He's from Berkeley, and he's a really funny guy. Like, so he actually kind of came up with this idea of the dying Earth, where it's so, the Earth is so far into the future that, the sun is basically going dark. But his series, and it's also like about mixing magic with technology, or like basically blurring the line between magic and, technology, because really, it is kind of magic. But his is actually like funny. Like it's written, it's humorous. It's very, very funny. I mean, it's extremely witty. Like I highly recommend people check it out, because it's called the Dying Earth series, and it's by a guy named Jack Vance. And he was an interesting guy because he's also like a California native, and he came from a pretty wealthy family in like, I think they lived in Oakland for a while, and I think his dad like lost everything during the depression, during the stock market crash, and so he grew up somewhat poor. But he has this kind of like he has an interesting kind of I guess it forced him to have to write and try to make a living that way. But he's extremely prolific and not very well known. But I like people who are sci-fi nerds like will know about him, and particularly sci-fi writers will know about him, because he's very, very influential in like to the writers, to the people who are, because he's just like he's funny in a way that very few sci-fi writers are funny. Like it's pure comedy,
Cool. Jack Vance.
Jack Vance. Yeah. It's very good.
Awesome. What else do you got there? You said, there's two of them.
There's two of them. I was going to talk about Cadillac Desert because I think, it's sort of like people know about it, and it was big, I think, in the 90s, especially because there was like a PBS documentary series made based on it. It's a book about the history of California and really the history of like the southwestern states of America, and it's told through the history of water and like water infrastructure, because people, if people who are listening to you are, live in California or visited, where the cities are, there is no water, really, like, or a continuous supply of water to sustain the kind of lifestyles that people are used to. And where the agriculture happens also doesn't have, year-round supply of water. So water has to be brought to these regions from somewhere else. And so where does that water come from? Who decided to do it? How does it happen? And he kind of tells the history of, really, of like the colonization of the west coast of America, right? By looking at how water infrastructure developed and was built, and in a way, it is kind of like a history of the sewage system or something, because it's like looking at infrastructure, but the infrastructure is actually extremely important, and the story is extremely fascinating, very lively, and it's like for real, like the film Chinatown, right, with by Roman Polanski with Jack Nicholson and Faye Dunaway, like part of that whole plot, right? It's sort of based on real events, and he gets into that in one of the chapters about how Los Angeles stole water from the Owens Valley, which is in the Sierras, hundreds of miles away, and like basically bought up land and stole water from the farmers there, and like destroyed like a little farming community, and built a pipeline, and just sucked all that water to Los Angeles so that the San Fernando Valley could be developed, which you probably know very well, Josh, the story. Yeah. And just, the civilization that it built, which is like, endless, just...
brawl.
Yeah, just cars,
domestic,
houses.
suburban suffering. But also those farmers, some would say they got their revenge.
Yeah, oh yeah, by just, unleashing the valley, like accent or something on the planet.
Yeah, I think, didn't they blow up that dam that Mulholland built? Some people theorize.
That's the theory. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I see what you mean. Yeah.
Structurally,
they killed. Yeah. I mean, yeah. That'd be pretty cool if that happened. That'd be pretty cool if that happened. I doubt it though, but because they're pretty incompetent, I guess. They're just like, I just love that the engineer had no engineering background. Mulholland had.
Was that what it was?
Yeah. He was just a guy who taught himself how to build dams.
Yeah, Cadillac Desert. I have like 3 copies of that book. I still have yet to read it, but
Yeah.
at my favorite bookstore in Tucson, Sharon at Desierto Books, she was always telling me I had to read it, and I bought a copy from her. So I'm obsessed with that stuff, but it is, and I would say there's also an element of There Will Be Blood in your
Mm-hmm.
documentary, Pistachio Awards, just that ultra capitalist, agenda digging under the earth in California.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
but yeah, it gets me it gets me a little anxious because it's like the layers of injustice to something even boiled down to as fundamental as our water, the water that we drink. Arrowhead, which some other company bought them, Arrowhead bottled water. They have some grandfathered permit that's been allowing them to steal water from the San Bernardino Mountains for the last 100 years, and they're paying something like $100 a year for it, and that's
It's
water
insane.
that
Yeah.
should be going to animals, should be going to streams, creeks, lakes, reservoirs, and it's not, and it's insane. It's insane. It's maddening.
Yeah, and I'd say Cadillac Desert is a very normie book. It's like if you, it's a very, I'd say it like skirts. It's a good it's a good introduction to that world because if you ever want to go darker, it's a good overview, and it's not like Mike Davis has some of this in his City of Quartz, but I think Mike Davis is a great intellectual and an academic, but he's as a writer, especially of longer works, he's not that. I don't know. He's let's say
He's
it's a little
difficult.
his stuff is difficult to get through, and his essays and things like that are much easier and better written, and but when he gets yeah, so but this is sort of a kind of the normie version of that, and it does get into the weeds of like federal policy because yeah, the whole like you think that I mean, what I think one of the central takeaway messages of that book though, and it also has like a kind of comic quality to it, which is like, if you think about like the image of the cowboy, conquering the West, is like it's about self-reliance, it's about individualism, rugged individualism. It's about taking care of yourself and your own, and like fuck, giving the finger to the big government. Like we don't want you out here. And it's like, and when you find out the history, it's like, oh wait, this whole the entire Southwest was colonized and settled and farmed because the federal government built the entire infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
and then it passed that obviously those costs onto tax, like people paid for it, the United States paid for it in various ways, and the ultimately the beneficiaries of the people who were able to make money off the farming, and were able to make money off the land speculation, and were able to make money of building out this civilization. Like they got it basically for free, and they didn't have to pay for it. Like you were saying with Arrowhead, the water, the water company in California, the bottled water company in California, yeah, they got it also for essentially for free, and they became, and so the story of who are these people, why did they get like that land, and so it like punctures the mythology again, not that it maybe people need puncturing anymore, that like. The idea that like it's this the big government versus the enterprising sort of individual that's at the core of American society. It's like no, it's like the most like quintessential cowboy Western like man was
But
essentially
that's
yeah,
just
yeah.
it. They do need puncturing because
Yeah.
so many people buy into the myth, and yeah, we're seeing the active effort to like water down our education. Our education system was so bad when I was growing up, and the fact that it's gotten worse is just it's yeah, we do need to keep puncturing the mythology. Yeah, the rugged cowboy, they were just cannon fodder. They were the first line
Yeah.
to go out, commit the violence, settle the land, and then the banks and the
Yeah, and then the
industrialists
Easter
came
yeah.
after.
Yeah, and then and California was essentially settled by East Coast, like Anglo kind of money. That's who came out, and then they made
And
money off the gold
every
rush. Yeah, and the
stupid
railroads.
town has a few huge Victorian homes, and you're like, who lived in those? Well, that was
Yeah,
the style of the East Coast. Those were the ones who came after.
yeah, exactly. No, that's exactly yeah. The guys, the lone men who came out, and they did come out, and they were there, and they were the suckers. You could say, right?
Or they were just desperate. They had been
No,
made
no.
desperate back east, and then in Europe, and then but they were the
Yeah.
suckers. They've cleverly mythologized these suckers into thinking that this is the rugged spirit, and then meanwhile we're paying taxes. Yeah, like you said, everything's sustained on federal infrastructure,
Yeah.
and
And
now
yeah.
they're selling that for parts, and we're paying more for it than ever. It's like the scam continues, but the mythology,
It's
that's
it's
what
a
sells
funny
it.
thing. It's a funny thing because like as you know, the California was settled because of the gold rush, and that was sort of like the Bitcoin of those days, wasn't it? It was like the Bitcoin
Truly.
craze of those days, and I mean, really, and I guess we're privileged now because you could take part in the gold rush without really having to travel thousands of miles overland by caravan, and then come to a place that has like no infrastructure for you, and then basically kill all the indigenous people that are there, and rape, and I guess some people would probably maybe be into that, but like you can be made a sucker without like the hardship that comes with it as much, without the physical hardship.
But it's all still unseen. And also, okay, you have to be
Yeah,
addicted to a screen.
yeah,
And then the Bitcoin mining sucks up an incredible amount of
yeah,
energy. The energy
yep.
is often extracted from indigenous lands. So it's still the same playbook. And you see it in the West Bank in Palestine. You see the videos. These settlers are filthy. They're clearly the most desperate people in the Israeli society, and they're out there, slowly but surely inching into other people's land and using violence and all kinds of, whatever predatory tactics to do it. But yeah, it's just the tale as old as time.
Yeah, things are. We think we've advanced. We've progressed somewhere. We're civilized now, but like things have not really. The basic structure of we haven't really changed as animals. We are who we are. We've been that way for tens of thousands of years, and the structure of how we behave has not really changed. I mean, what has changed is technology, and the technology has allowed fewer and fewer and fewer people to control more and more and more resources. I mean, because I think the central function, the central effect of of the Industrial Revolution has been about centralizing power. And we were talking about before the telegraph. How it allowed essentially, like, let's say, one company to then suddenly be like whoever owned the wires of the telegraph, right, could control the flow of information. You could have one company or several large companies control all the infrastructure, let's say railroad infrastructure in the entire country. And then you could have banks suddenly control giant territory, whereas before everything was a lot more local. So technologies like the steam engine, then obviously the internal combustion engine, and then telegraph and radio, all these things allowed fewer and fewer organizations, right, to control more and more land and more territory and more resources. And with the internet, like, you can see that going to, like, I don't know what the breaking point is going to be, but we're reaching it. It's pretty clear. Like, I mean, I don't know, like, I live in Manhattan right now, and it's like the main worker on the streets of Manhattan works for Jeff Bezos. That's like the main person, on the streets of Manhattan, because you walk out, because everyone buys everything on Amazon, and it literally, like, there are just the city's just full. The streets are full of people just working for Jeff Bezos, like delivering, sorting, driving, all these things, like, and it's not just Amazon, it's Whole Foods and all these things. So it's kind of shocking, how like one company basically has taken over the entire like retail industry in America,
Yeah,
right? And not just
and
America, the world, even Europe and Canada and things like that. So yeah,
the
it's
rest of people who aren't working for them are working for them because that's where they're spending their money,
exactly,
right?
yeah. We're all working for him, ultimately, yeah. Like either he's paying us or we're paying him,
The
or
money is
either
just
he's
the
paying
same
someone.
$500
Yeah.
billion going in his hands.
Exactly.
And
It's a circular, money circulating. It's healthy.
yeah, except he's sticking to a billion
He's got
sticks
sticky
every.
fingers. Yeah, he's got
Yeah.
he's like a gecko. He's just like, yeah. He can't help it. It just happens.
Of
But yeah, like, and so you would never have that, right? I mean, the centralization of power that technology is allowed, and I think people have been sold on this idea that the internet actually decentralized power, that we have, like, look, we have these phones and we have all these things and we can take videos of, police or something, and that's empowering us, and like we can learn about things, immediately. But actually, no. It's like what the internet has done is created a global information infrastructure that has allowed fewer and fewer entities, more and more control over like the economy, over our lives, over, the physical resources, cultural resources. And so we've been like disempowered by this technology, actually, not empowered by it, Yeah. And we can vote or something, but like, a lot of these like structures that like the structure of government that we exist in is actually predates the Industrial Revolution, like it hasn't even really kept up with the times, not really, like I mean, basically, yeah. Like the government is powerless. It seems powerless to do anything against these corporate entities that have so much, are so powerful and so organized. So, yeah, no, it's we're
No,
not.
it's a fascinating time, and like you said, we're about to
Yeah.
see we're closer to seeing the breaking point to things, and that in and of itself is fascinating. It's I don't think a lot of us would choose it, but this is our era, so we are here to at least witness it. And yeah, the con of the internet and the con of our government. Yeah, everyone's been saying like, Nancy Pelosi ripping up a crown to protest no kings. And it's
Oh
like
my God, man.
you've been in power for 37 years. You've made millions of dollars through inside trading. You have wielded more power and wealth than most kings ever have. And
Like no kings, but it's okay to have barons, to have counts, to have princes, all these things. It's fine because
yeah, what another con?
I know it's funny. It's funny. Like I mean I don't know. I mean, did you even like? Yeah, I can't take that stuff seriously. It's hard to.
I
Again,
can't
it's
either.
one of the pseudo events.
A pseudo event
Yeah.
created by people to sort of moderate and water down any sort of active revolution or resistance. I will still take the side of like, hey, people are out in the streets, they've gotten out of their homes, and like that in and of itself is fortifying, and to build that muscle memory to get up and stand for something, I think is
Yeah.
generally helpful. So I'm not like totally shitting on it. But I do think, yeah, even just the symbology of it all is, yeah, it's yeah, why not no billionaires? Why not no gods? And it's like, yeah, because everything needs to be watered down.
It's the usual, like, I don't know. It's like when elite capture of like social of creative social energies. That like people
Yes.
do realize that like it's a problem. It's systemic. There's this guy. He kind of represents all these horrible things, and probably they kind of are bigger than him. Because otherwise he wouldn't so easily ascend to the throne. And get voted in, and have all these levers of power, and have the entire apparatus basically at his command, right? That's something that he didn't create these structures. He didn't like even really take them over. I mean, they're just there for the taking, and he has a lot of people who support him. So I'd say half the country supports him, and so like that's something like, or at least whatever he's selling them, right? Like whatever vision, whatever vicarious thing that they're getting through him, and it's bigger than him. But like rather than actually address the root causes of what made Trump possible, and what made all this like hatred and spite and misery, and like the kind of like sadism that's the flip side of it, with him. Like people want to see other people suffer because they suffer. They want to see other people humiliated because they've been humiliated. It's like, so what they're given is a spectacle. They're given almost like an MMA fight or something. They're given no one wants to discuss that. They just want to protest whatever, some superficial sloganeering about Trump trying to be a king, and we don't have kings in America.
Exactly.
I liked how you said it's like having, how you put it about not coming to terms, but
Confronting
hiding
the reality.
yeah, confronting your reality, or like not hiding your reality. I don't think America's very good at confronting its reality. Maybe.
No, and it speaks to the entertainment complex of it all. It speaks to the society of the spectacle. Even hey, did you watch the debate? Oh yeah, Zoran Mamdani burned Andrew
Yeah.
Cuomo 3 different times. Man, did he burn him? And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
but yeah. Once again, we're steering ourselves into personality and
I know,
gossip and
I know.
gotcha culture, but the material fades away. And the material is
It's a
what
good
drew
point.
people to Zoran. It was, yeah, we want free buses. We want see our tax money going to children's lunches and free buses and all these
I
basic
know,
things
man.
that.
It's having like a child. I have a four-year-old daughter, and we live in New York, where obviously having a kid here is like it's insane. I mean, it's expensive everywhere in America, but here it's just through the roof. And one of the things that like the okay, maybe they're like not great in a lot of ways, but like the progressive kind of politicians like De Blasio, who came before him, they did is they instituted, expanded like the pre-K program for kids, basically made it for available to like younger children. So like basically saving, maybe taking a huge load off of parents, taking a huge financial burden off parents' shoulders in New York. And I mean, and so for me, like Mondami, if he's like even does something like that, or helps alleviate a little bit of the burden, he's already better than whatever is coming. And so, and yeah, the spectacle you see online, I can't even engage with it anymore. It's so depressing. Like it's like everybody wants him to be the purest like manifestation of who they think, to be Jesus, to be to be pure in all in every possible way, to be perfectly anti-Zionist, to condemn every and every politician who has ever said something slightly critical of the sort of the pro-Palestinian cause. And I understand the urge, but it's like, look, this is politics, this is real life. Zoran is not like coming into power with like 5 million supporters ready to like take to the streets or to do a general strike on his behalf. He's like got tepid support. He's got like barely enough to even get into office. And it's like, and you want him to immediately fire, and to like reorganize the city of New York, the financial capital of the world, still along like whatever, like social democratic principles. It's like, come on, it's like it's people's expectations are just so delusionally, because they just are they want again. It's like they want their. It's like they everything is a show to them, and they want their cultural preferences, entertainment
Yeah,
preferences
curated.
immediately reflected back to them. Yeah. They can't so the complexity of like running a political campaign in such a city, of like having to thread the needle of like saying what you believe and staying true to your values, and while also having to compromise on all these different things, because it's like you're not coming in with an invading army. It's like you're not a conquering army. You like have to like deal with these existing institutions, and you're not even that powerful. You're not even in office yet. And so you're just trying to win an election, and winning an election is like, it's you say things, and who knows how he'll be. Maybe he'll be a great mayor. Maybe he'll sell out, very quickly and become, kind of an embarrassment. We don't know, but but the fact that people want like their candidate, or these people might not even live in New York City, like they might not even have a stake in anything, and yet they want like that guy to like just say exactly what they think he should say, and they'll just like go on and on and on about it on Twitter, and people seem to like that too, which is interesting. People like are supportive of that, like of this take down, destructive kind of online performative politics.
Yeah, we're addicted. We're addicted to it. And that is interesting. Like I've been hearing about how the tech companies and the targeted agendas, advertisers or government propagandas, whatever, they will fence people. They will find a section of people and fence them in with all the same content so they don't know any different of the world. And it's
Yeah.
interesting, though, hearing you say that, there's also this inversion where we then start fencing people, and if they don't stay inside the fence that we've become accustomed, we start
Mm-hmm.
to reject them as incompatible with our own fencing.
Yeah.
And that hearing you say that really sunk in. I mean, we elected this super progressive DA in Los Angeles when I was living there, George Gascon,
Yes.
and it it was a total disaster because, like you said, there was no conquering army around him. Nothing else in that ultra capitalist city reflected his worldview. So he was being more humane toward low level criminals, toward robberies, toward whatever. But everything felt really chaotic because it's not like there were these social safety nets for these people to fall back on. And yeah, the city ended up rejecting him because of it. ultimately. And yeah. So no, I mean nuance
Yeah, I
and
mean the same thing
if
happened in San Francisco with Chesa Boudin. He was also he basically did the same thing, and because he was an outlier, he didn't he again just didn't prosecute low level crimes and try to try to have a progressive humane policy towards criminal justice policy, and he got recalled. So like all the VCs and all the kind of like reactionary kind of liberals in San Francisco organized this propaganda campaign and actually booted him out of office.
all the
So
people who sucked up the wealth and kicked everyone out onto the streets
yes,
now
yeah.
upset that someone's trying to get the people
Well, not
some
throwing them in jail
humanity.
for stealing some Snicker bars,
Yeah, exactly.
and so yeah, it was it's exactly. I mean, there's no. It's politics are so weak. Everything is. People think that they're doing politics by being on Twitter all day, and that's not politics. That's anti-politics. In fact, that's one of the most atomizing experiences you can possibly engage in. Is politics is about being with people. I say this knowing how difficult it is and knowing how much time it takes. I mean, I actually don't. For instance, I want to, so I moved back to the city, just this summer, and there's a workout spot that I go to because I don't go to gyms anymore. They're just depressing. I can't be in the gym, and so there's some parallel bars, some pull-up bars, in the Central Park, and there's two of them, in the entire Central Park. There's only two pull-up bars, and there's thousands of people who use these pull-up bars. There's a whole community of people who go there, a couple of times a week, and there's even a WhatsApp group of people who and people go to the bar afterwards, and it's pretty interesting. I'm only kind of getting to know some people there, and I've been trying to organize. I want the city to build a couple of more pull-up bars and maybe put some other things that people can use to expand it, to expand the facilities, and just to even do that, it's so I mean, I have barely any time to even do the first steps, to figure out exactly who do you even talk to. Now I'm talking to people. I'm about to draft a little petition, that people can sign and put their names on it. But I mean, I barely can, I've been thinking about it for the last 2 months, and it's just a lot of effort. I don't know, even something as basic as that, to just. And so it's easy to just go on these platforms and just mouth off all day and think that you're engaging in politics, but yeah, you're not. And
What a great example.
Yeah,
It's like
I don't
that.
know. Yeah,
Like in Portland, they're just building bus benches and they're sticking them where they need to be.
yeah.
People are doing it, and it's like that fundamental action is so much deeper than anything I've ever conducted on my Twitter or Threads.
Totally. They've because they took out all the benches because so homeless people don't sleep on them, right?
Yeah, exactly. That and yeah, I mean, in LA, they finally put some shaded bus stops in places that desperately needed shade, but under the condition that there were video ads playing on both sides of the structure that they used to give shade. I mean, I was just living in Tucson, Arizona, and it gets 115 degrees out, and there's no shaded bus stops in sections of the city. Yeah, and yeah, you'd probably be better just building your own pull-up bar and seeing how long it took them to notice. And then if they did notice, whether they took it down or not, and then they would probably make their own version of it because it got popular with people. But
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
but easier said than done. Easy for me to say, in my headset and podcast microphone. It's like that movie Akira, that Kurosawa movie
Huh?
about that guy who wants to build a children's playground, and just the layers of bureaucracy you have to go through and the obstruction toward
Yes.
habitability within a city or even a suburb or a rural area. It's insane because
Yeah.
anything that
Yeah.
moves against capital, you're gonna have to fight for.
Yeah, and speaking of that, it's funny. If you want to do anything in the Central Park, it's a very important land in New York. Millions of people use it, and the actual park, it's in the city, but it's a private organization runs it. It's a nonprofit, and the nonprofit is funded by the billionaires. And I was talking to an employee of it, and he said, yeah, he'll actually he'll get his manager will field calls from donors to this organization that runs the park, It's called the conservancy, and like they'll like demand like certain things be done, and they'll have to like go and like plant things, because like
Wow.
some guy that is it insane, yeah. So like
That's
actually
insane. Of
this
course.
Central Park is run by like a billionaire backed or
Well, also
nonprofit,
those billionaires they suck up the vending contract, so it makes sense. Like, didn't Donald Trump? He had the contract for like the ice skating rinks, or
Yeah, yeah.
then the food concession stands, and there's business to be had even in that. Wow, but I didn't realize it was that straightforward as it sounds
Yeah,
like.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, and like apparently they can even like if they want like some kind of I don't know the details of it, but I guess if you are a really big donor, you can like you can say like I want this Glade to be designed in this fashion, and I'm gonna design it myself, and then the guy was telling me that he like this billionaire basically put all these different like plants together that shouldn't be together because like some of
Jeez.
them like need a lot of water and others don't need any water, and so like but they're like
Jeez.
next to each other, so it's like impossible to take care of, but they wanted it that way, and so like they had to build it that way. So I mean this
Okay,
is
so
like
now we know
this.
how to
Yeah.
do it. You call up, pretend you're Bill Ackman,
Yes.
say you're on a workout kick, and you really want more pull-up
You
bars, or
demand it to
even
happen tomorrow. Yeah.
yeah, get it done.
Tomorrow. Yes.
Yeah. So that
No, that's a
okay,
good point.
easy.
That'd be pretty funny to do. Yeah, that's a good.
You could
That's a
even
good
do
idea.
like the AI voice. I mean, use all their tools against them. Yeah.
I bet you. I could probably get pretty far with it too. Like just initiate an email chain. From you have to find out who the big donors are, right?
Yeah.
To the park, and then pretend to be one of them or their assistant, essentially, and then.
Okay. Well, if
Uh,
anyone in New York City starts seeing these pull-up bars popping up, they'll know why.
exactly.
Don't
Yeah.
tell. Our little secret. Well, honestly, it's been great chatting. I feel like you and I have much more to say. But anyone in San Francisco and the Bay Area who wants to hear it, that'll be on November 1st at the Roxy. Anything else you'd like to add?
No. I mean, I appreciate you having me on. It's always nice to be able to just like talk loosely about things like that, And then, well, it's funny we start talking and then we realize how everything's sort of connected, yeah, and it's pretty clear that my interests lie in the dark side of humanity,
Mine too. In fact, I boiled it down on my walk the other day. I was thinking, what if I were to tell people what kind of books I like to read? And I think, this may sound like kind of like cliche or I don't know, something performative, but it's like anything that challenges the current structure of our world because the structure of our world is not right. It's
yeah.
inhumane. And so anything that challenges that inhumanity doesn't just go along with it. Oh, because I was thinking, I'm living in Santa Cruz. There's so many of these little free libraries out in front of these people's
Mm-hmm.
nice little homes, big homes, and there's never any good books. And it's like, okay, why are these books not good to me? Because the woman in the house who read them, they're good to her. And I think that's what it boils down to. These books are accepting of our current structure, and they tell their stories within that. And to me, I need something that is confronting the current structure of our reality because it's not right. And to
'Cause
pretend
you're,
that
yeah,
it's
you
right
yeah.
is exhausting to me.
Yeah, like I mean, you have like a heretical kind of. I guess you have a heretical streak, I mean,
I'm a witch.
yeah, or which, yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, yeah, it was great talking to you.
Yeah,
we
great
can
talking to
leave
you too.
we can leave my third book for another time. It's called. I'll just throw it out there just so people know it. And the reason I picked it is because maybe I should just let me just say it because I feel like it's. People are like, oh, how can America, back Israel and, like Israel's engaging in a genocide and all these things. And like you were saying later, it's like, you have to kind of confront your reality. Or you want to confront or challenge your reality. And the reality is that America has never confronted its own genocide. It's just not a thing. And there's a book called The American Genocide. And it's specifically about not the entire sort of genocide of American Indians or Native Americans. It's about like the California component of it, because I picked it because we're sort of staying on the California theme. And, one thing that I kind of understood reading it is that like I was reading it like right at the time when I think there was like, it was either being open or there was some anniversary or something. And like in DC, there's like memorial to like victims of communism, basically, like a victims of communism museum where, they're like blaming communism for killing, 2 billion people or whatever, and I was like thinking, oh wait, and I started thinking, well, there's like there's all these different sort of Holocaust museums in America, in LA and DC, and there are like smaller ones in like cities all around the country, and yet there's not a single. And I wanted to actually find out, like, is there a single museum that's dedicated just to the Holocaust of American Indians, like in America, And there is not a single museum in America dedicated to the genocide that happened here, in America.
Wow.
There's the Smithsonian has like a room about like and it addresses a little bit it addresses it, but it isn't a thing, like so when you live in a society, right, that is like carried out genocide as its founding, we're not responsible for it, we didn't do it, like, it's not our burden necessarily to bear. I mean, I'm an immigrant. I wasn't even born in this fucking country. So, but it's not, even if you were born here, like, you didn't do it, right? It's not like, but the like kind of the sin is there, the founding action, right? And the society that was built on that, right? It's there. And to not address it, in a public way means that you're going to be, repressing a lot of other things. And so I think for people who don't, can't understand why America would be doing something like this, would be backing a genocidal society like Israel, I think have not like come to terms with American society itself, and American society itself has not come to terms with itself. It just, and I wonder, is you're like a more American than I am, like, why do you think that is? Like, why is it so hard?
I think it's because it's still ongoing.
Yeah.
I think it's still ongoing. I think there are still Native people. I think they are still actively resisting. We are still we are sending extractive industries into their land to take more of what they are the guardians of. And that's why we don't have the museum, because then we'd have to reckon with the fact that it's ongoing. That Pete Hegseth, just this is the second time I've mentioned him 2 weeks in a row. He just like re-honored the soldiers who were behind the last massacre, federally initiated massacre of the Battle of Wounded Knee, which I believe is like 1890, 1893. That's so recent. My grandfather was born in 1901. He came from Russia as a baby, at 1 year old. But like, so I'm 2 or 3 generations away from the very physical, active, direct confrontation of this genocide, but also it's still ongoing. The Native people are still resisting active measures to extract from their land and harm them. That's the reason Native women go missing. Native women go missing and are murdered at disproportionate rates because extractive industries send a bunch of men into their land. The men get bored, the men get violent, the men get drunk, whatever. And the only women around are Native women. It's like that's ongoing. And so, but I totally agree. People do not want to look that in the mirror at all. And it is the blueprint for what's happening in Palestine. It was a blueprint for inspired some of even the Nazi movement.
Of course. Oh yeah. I mean, the Nazis they were very inspired by like the racial laws in America. Yeah, no, and and one thing about this, the American genocide, it's an academic book. I mean, it's written by, actually, I think the guy who wrote it is now a professor at UCLA. Really interesting guy. One thing that stood out to me, though, is a very quintessentially American thing. Is okay, so like the California genocide actually happened over like a very short period of time. Like the active phase of it happened right after the gold rush, from like
it's like 10 years, right?
Yeah, I think the book goes from like 1870 something to like 1880 something, and because the federal government, it was basically like the state and the federal government were like so kind of slow to organize these things. Actually, the federal government promised funds for the genocide, right? To like arm militias and to go and like hunt people down. But they were kind of slow and deliberate, like, you know, coming through with the funds. So the state of California basically issued these investment certificates, like that you were guaranteed a return. So if you buy like basically an investment, if you invest in arming a genocide militia like a death squad, you are guaranteed. I can't remember what the annual return is. You were guaranteed. It was a guaranteed investment, and then because they knew that the federal government was going to come and basically make the state whole. It was like, so it was an investment. You could invest directly into the genocide. Like, so, do you know what I mean? And so there's like, you can actually still find, you know, these certificates exist, like a bond, you know, you like buy a bond essentially, you know, and the owner or holder of that piece of paper would like be guaranteed a dividend from that investment. And so like, it was such an American thing. And I totally agree. And I don't, you know, and the ongoing thing is not just that it's like you know, more and more land is taken or more resources are extracted from that land, is that like the actual kind of the land rights, you know, in America are basically a result of that. Like if you go to California and even, you know, you watch my film, and even in the film, we go very briefly to like a reservation, right? In one part, and we talk to a tribal elder who had been driven off like this, what is now like farmland, you know, and is now like backed by a dam that's, you know, productive farmland where you can, you know, there's people are growing citrus there, and the people who actually own the land and live in this little town, you know, their ancestors, you know, like they're basically great grandfathers probably, you know, and grandfathers were the ones who like basically stole the land from the, you know, the people who were then pushed into the mountains to die where there was no food, and, you know, where the reservation now exists with a casino, you know, and so like, so the actual like structure of society is very much like, yeah, like it's what you were saying, it's very much tied to the genocide. And to admit it happened is to admit that it's unjust, that there is a moral wrong at the core of how wealth and resources are distributed in this country. And so it's ultimately very much like Israel, you know. So like it's extremely like Zionism, right? So America, I think why there's such a big affinity between the two countries is because they're ultimately it's the same kind of colonial, you know, kind of nationalistic dispossession that happened, and so so yeah, like I wonder what would happen. I mean, I guess America would only admit to it when like it would be forced to admit to it by like an invading country or something like that, or like
or
yeah,
the
right?
distance of time when it's finally all settled, right?
Yeah.
They're settlers and they're settled,
But
and
do you
I
think
think
it can
that's what
actually ever be settled? Like, I mean,
I
the
hope not.
conflict,
No,
because
I think the natives are going to outlast us. I think Hawaiians are going to outlast us. I think
yeah,
they've been here much longer than us, and we are a temporary stain, but
yeah,
we are not permanent. A couple hundred years. That's the tough part. Having to go, hey, you know that cabin that our family has in Montana that we've had for generations, and we all go to every summer at the lake. Yeah,
yeah.
that was acquired through violent aims or just recently after them. And to do that, it's like I have so many memories at our cabin.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
love our cabin. You know, the whole family gets there. We refuse to sell it. We're taking care of it. You know, and it's like, yeah, my house with a nice yard and a trampoline, not my house, but you know, people's, that it's recent. And to the point where my wife like is like, okay, you got to cool it with calling everything settler, this settler that, because I'm so glad. I can't believe I almost cut this part short. This is my obsession, because
This is your thing. Okay, I didn't
once you
realize.
see it, you can't unsee it, and it's like it's fascinating. There's certain parts of the country, and I think California being the last settled sort of, or
Hmm.
one of the last settled, and the repercussions and the society that evolved out of that in such a short span of time. And that's just it. You got to think Israel's just going, okay, we're going to do all our terrible things, but look, in a couple hundred years, we can call ourselves the land of the free, just like they do in the U.S.
Yeah, yeah,
The problem being, everyone sees it. It's on video.
yeah.
You can't hide the mythology as easily. But yeah, I'm reading a book right now called Our American Israel,
Oh,
that
interesting.
was brought up on the Chris Hedges podcast not too long ago, which you've been on. Uh, and it's about the merging of those two mythologies and
That's
the sort of
interesting.
toxic relationship there, and just the
Yeah.
even the symbology and yeah.
That is interesting. Have you read there's this by Greg Grandin, it's called The End of the Myth.
No.
I think because it's about like because if you're interested in settler colonialism, I mean, he talks about like essentially like the kind of the like the frontier was this like central part of American identity, or like that we're always conquering new frontiers, and then because well, first of all, like America kind of hit the frontier physically, kind of on the West Coast, in the Hawaii,
Yes.
but like, and then more recently, it like hit the frontier globally, like sort of this, it's like neoliberal kind of whatever, it's imperial ambitions like have kind of hit their limits because now they're being pushed back, in Russia, in China, it's not as easy to expand anymore, and so like that whole like the entire America functioned, because you didn't need to have like a welfare state because you could always give people land, like
Mm,
because you just take away the land from what
mm,
the native population, you give it to people basically, right? And so
mm,
it was being kind of redistributed. That was the redistributive aspect of this sort of the American society, and like when that ended, it's sort of like everything began to break down,
mm,
in America. And now like the kind of the frontier, the frontier mythology. I mean, speaking of like the frontier is almost like turning inward now
inward.
because now like Trump and with ICE and whatever are like, basically the border zone can be anywhere, right? The frontier can be anywhere. It's in Chicago, it's in New York, it's in I don't know, Oklahoma. I mean, because suddenly like with the foreigners everywhere, like everything is, the threat external, is everywhere. And so the kind of the end of the myth, and it's sort of like it ended, it hit its limits, and it's sort of folding back on itself. And also like kind of dysfunctional because the primary engine, of like kind of wealth distribution, or in America is like it doesn't function anymore, because you can't like
Mm,
take land away from someone and give it to. You have to now take land away from the billionaires that own it, and give it to
right.
people. And no one wants to do that. No, well,
No.
people maybe want to. The people want that, but the people who run this country definitely don't. And so
They're
it's an
they're
interesting
unwilling.
book.
So
Yeah,
they're like, we got
yeah,
to
yeah,
clean out that fallow farm. We got to clean out that the project building in
yeah,
Chicago. Yeah, because the plots are getting smaller. That's the thing
yeah,
about this settler colonialism. Everyone's plots are getting smaller. I'm not going to have the suburban house my parents did, and so on and
yeah.
so forth. It keeps nesting down, and yeah, it's fascinating to see that end. I got to read that book because that's
He's
also right
great.
up my alley.
Yeah, he's great. But yeah, all right. Well, thank you for having me on,
Thank
and
you.
yeah,
Thank you so much, Yasha Levine. Yeah, I'll be seeing you shortly, actually.
yeah. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, and we actually added another show in Oakland too. I'll be announcing that. I'll probably by the time the episode comes out, I'll probably have already announced it.
Okay.
But yeah, it'll be a pleasure
I'll,
to see you, and yeah, fun to
likewise, I'll
hang
put
out.
links to everything under, and yeah, it'll be great to see you. And thanks so much for coming on, and thanks for sharing everything that you did. Yeah, I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Thanks a lot, man. Okay.
All right. Thank you. And thank you for listening to another episode of Turek Books, and happy reading. Thank you for listening to another episode of Turek Books. Be sure to like, subscribe, thumbs up, any kind of thing that could help us get listened to or watched by more people. We really appreciated having you and hope to see you again next week with a new guest and plenty of books. Take care until then.